Howdy folks. I was lucky to get my hands on a Leatherman Garage number 5. Worked hard to kind of get that with 2 different computers running. And the reason I really wanted this is my ideal Leatherman free multi-tool. In fact, over a year ago on Reddit, I posted the Leatherman, what I call the Leatherman Z1, free Z1. And what it was my modifications of the Leatherman free series with my ideal tool layout. The funny part is that if you go look at my rendering compared to this tool, I had predicted every single tool that's in here. I even have the spring-loaded pliers. Inadvertently, I put in this screw. I didn't realize that these would actually be spring-loaded, but I knew that Leatherman had a different version that wasn't a solid rivet. Along with the diamond file. Although on mine, I put in an actual chisel surface, which is something I might go ahead and grind into this one. I'm not going to talk too much about a review of this. It's a great product. Texas Tool Crib just recently did a review. He did a teardown of the spring-loaded pliers to show you how that works. I'm going to do a teardown of this with everything except the spring-loaded pliers. The reason I'm doing that is that in order to make my holsters here, I create a 3D model of the Leatherman tool that is as accurate as possible. To do that, I actually take apart the parts, photograph them under basically without any parallax effect with a ruler next to it, and then actually 3D model that, backing it up with caliper measurements. I've done that in order to make this holster, which I sell for the free series, and now won't fit the Leatherman Garage, and presumably will not fit the Arc, assuming that they keep the same blade profile for the Arc. Of course, they do share 90% of the same components as the free series. Scales are the same size, overall thickness is the same size. And so this same spring mechanism that I use to lock in the holster will presumably still work with the Garage. Now, talking about what the holster the Garage does come with, this leather holster here, this is a lot better to me than the nylon holsters. I know people like the nylon holsters because they carry more accessories, which is what my holsters do. But they get really bulky. I like that this is slim. Now, I actually haven't been using this holster. What I've been doing is I've been carrying this in my pocket every day since the day I got it. I've already been using it plenty. I have used the file today to deburr some parts, basically. You can see that I've already worn out my bit a little bit. I've been using this every single day, and it's been an incredible tool. Every part of it I've used basically except for the can opener. That's the one component that I may end up swapping back out for the funny part is the most useless tool besides the tiny file on the free series is the ruler, but the ruler is not what's useless. To me, I actually do use this flathead and I do use the wire stripper, so I might swap those out. I do want to talk about some of the design features they put in here that I had in my free Z1, specifically thumb stud here on the screw. In mine, of course, I designed in my thumb studs that I have 3D printed. I actually do like the round thumb stud better because it pivots with your thumb, where this thumb stud, all I have to do is left-handed. I did make this curved so that it kind of rides with your thumb, but it's actually not as comfortable as this one. So they've done a really good job with that. The thumb studs I do sell do fit the Leatherman Garage number 5. But I wouldn't actually put a thumb stud on the file or the saw because you want to be able to use this entire surface. Same thing with the saw. It's mostly for that main blade deployment. Now, do a little bit of a comparison against my modified free P4. So I designed these mods specifically for a couple of reasons. I wanted the diamond file back. This is the diamond file and crosscut file from the Leatherman the Leatherman Surge. And you can see I've used the heck out of this. So I designed this T-shank adapter with many prototypes. And if you happen to have a free P4, can't get your hands on a Garage 5 or the upcoming Arc, it ends up being too expensive for you, I do sell these modifications. They're not the cheapest thing because they are 3D printed out of steel and bronze, out of metal 3D prints, but they do work well. I do want to talk about the bit driver. One thing I had in my Z1 rendering was the same feature that I have in here, which is that you can take this and now put it through here and have a 1/4 inch drive. That works really well with the ratchet driver in order to make this into a ratcheting screwdriver. Very similar to this very popular small driver that's out there. I really do wish they would have put that into the Garage number 5. I think that they might have had room, but they added this spring effect here. This is basically very similar to what's in the Leatherman Wave. When I did my Leatherman Arc leaked renderings, I actually swapped that to a 2-piece because I thought that they were going to use the free series and do a kind of a clamp-on mechanism. Now I will say, I've had to modify mine already. There's 2 things that I've had to modify on my Garage number 5. One is loosening up the pliers, or the actual joints, which pretty much everybody seems to be able to need, so that this opens up real nice. And the other one was that this bit would not stay in real easily. Now I can actually hold the tool by the bit, not have any issues with that. Now how I modified that is really simple. Take this, put it on a flat surface, and just basically smack that into a flatter shape. I did end up finding I had to kind of bend the springs in. When you do that, it will kind of pop one of the springs out, and so you might need to take this out, actually bend those back in. But in either case, mine now has a much higher retention. Still closes just fine. Another thing that people have run into is that the file scrapes the paint. I'm not worried about that. I plan on using this. I'm not a collector, despite the fact that I got lots of Leathermans. I am somebody who uses these tools every day. This is my holster that I wear every single day I'm at work. And this has been through the ringer. It's been sweaty, it's been oily, it's been greasy. I've had to wash it off, and still is in great shape. Of course, one of my favorite features, especially with the new bit driver, is being able to hold all these bits. And you can see I've pretty much used every single bit. Looks like I have used every single bit, along with a ratchet driver. So I can carry this, and I have an entire toolkit in my pocket. So let's go ahead and start taking apart the Garage number 5. And this is the same basically set up to take apart the free series. And I'm going to move my magnetic mat in here so that if anything falls out, it doesn't go bouncing away on me. And I'll talk about kind of the individual components as we go. Now these are Torx T9 connections. It's always a little bit tricky to hold both sides at the same time. And when they got their thread locker on them, they're a little bit hard to undo at first. Come on. You really don't want to start stripping the heads on these. While one of the screws is fairly, you could replace fairly easily. These are number 2 Torx. They're not quite pan head, they're kind of a custom head on them. But the shoulder screw is a custom design from Leatherman. This guy's actually taking quite a bit of force to get out. There we go. Now when I take these apart, what I'll do is I'll push this through like this. And you got to be aware that there is a washer between the scale and the blade. And there's going to be another one between the scale and, in this case, this, what do we got here? The saw. You don't want to lose those. They set your depth for how far this comes apart. But let's go ahead and take out the Magna Cut blade. Of course, there's much to do about this actual metal. I won't necessarily talk about that, but I'm excited to have the best steel on the market for a blade. This kind of long belly here that's mostly flat works really well when you kind of need to whittle something. I really like the way that it comes to a point at the tip. Now, one thing that Leatherman does, you notice it has this kind of drop and then another drop. That shape is kind of a requirement of the Free series. I forgot to kind of show this before I took it apart, but I'll show it with the saw over here. So when you deploy a blade on the Free series, there's a little bit of movement before this cam starts moving. It's not quite as pronounced with the blade here. Let me go to the blade on my modified one. So you can see this kind of deploys loosely before this really starts moving, and then it starts moving a lot more when I get past that point. That loose movement is basically what the magnet holds in, and the cam doesn't do much. And so they specifically drop the blade across in order to make sure that this isn't going to poke you. In fact, when I do my modification for the scalpel holder, I specifically pick a scalpel blade that doesn't have a sharp tip for that same reason, so that this isn't poking you potentially if we're going to pocket carry this. Regarding the screw here, it is just a number 256 screw, and it is a Torx, I think it's a T8 though, a little bit smaller. Let's compare it against the known screw, which is number 256. Nope, looks like it's a little bigger. Definitely bigger. So that looks like a number 440 screw, and they just tap the blade directly. It looks like they got a little bit of thread locker on here. It's not the blue thread locker. So they might have changed the thread locker type. Guess we'll go ahead and leave that out for now. All right, next component to come out is the can opener. There's absolutely no change between the Free series can opener and this can opener. I don't ever need a can opener. In fact, I think the only time I've actually used this as a tool was to open kind of it was basically, I guess, a metal can, but it wasn't a food can, or I don't go camping with it. So this to me is kind of the most useless tool. Now the package opener. This is again made exactly as I rendered on my Leatherman Free Z1. So I took, because I knew that they're going to take out the bit holder, or take out, in order to have the bit holder, they were going to need to take out their flathead, package opener, and Phillips. And so it made sense to do this reprofile. Putting the can opener back into here. This could have been thinner compared to what was on the Free series. And so, let's see here. Actually, of course. So 3.3 millimeters, or exactly 1.3 inches. I believe they're 0.14 inches on the Free series. I'll double, if I'm wrong on that, I'll correct it on the text on the screen here. Next up is the awl. Now, again, this awl is exactly the same as the one on the Free series. They didn't make any changes whatsoever. In my Free Z1 rendering, I put in the wire stripper onto the awl. If you look here, the geometry of the wire stripper and the ruler are exactly the same. They're the exact same thickness. To me, there's no reason why they couldn't have put this feature onto the awl. If it's a matter of tooling, it's the exact same geometry. They should have just been able to tool this in. Now, this is something I might be able to add myself by using a small file and just scraping in one direction until I had that profile. It's going to be really hard to get that sharpened, so I don't know. Again, I think replacing the can opener with the ruler is what I'll end up doing to get that feature back. Now, the springs that are in here are, again, exactly the same as the Free series with no change. Oh, those look like they do have some thin washers. I didn't realize they actually had those. These are in the Free series in various places. So in this case, they got a thin washer between the spring and the MagnaCut blade. This is a really, really thin washer. Might even, if it's 0.01, it's the same as in the Free series. 0.005. That's why I didn't think it was even there. So be careful of that when you take it apart. Just pull out the next spring. Now this one does not have a washer between the cam spring and the saw. And then there is the thicker washer between the saw and the scale. By the way, if you're ever looking for really thin washers like this 0.005, you'll find them on McMaster, but not necessarily as a washer. They'll be a precision shim. Regular washers to mil spec standards or SAE standards are going to have varying thicknesses, where precision shim is going to have a set thickness. And the shaft on here, the shoulder screw here, is 0.122, just again a little bit smaller than 0.125. Now you will find that Leatherman is designed with a mix of inches and metric. The blade thicknesses are all in inches. So 0.102 with a little bit of paint for the MagnaCut blade. This should be 0.13 on the dot. And the awl is 0.06. It's like 0.061, 1.55 millimeters. And I believe the can opener should be the same. Nope, a little bit thicker. Make sure I'm on a flat spot here. Make sure I don't have any dirt in the middle. It's interesting that's coming out to a little bit different. 0.068. They're usually on very whole numbers there. All right, so I got that whole side of the tool taken apart. Now, talk about the magnet inside here. Let's go ahead and pull that out, because this is something that I've seen broken on a lot of Free series parts, where what happens is people use their tool with the hammer or just general use of swapping the parts in and out, and what ends up happening is their magnet ends up cracking. Now, people may not realize that a magnet like this is not a solid piece of metal. It looks like a solid piece of metal. It's actually a sintered piece of metal, basically metallic powder that is just melted together and bonded under heat, and then this gets coated with nickel, and that's what's making it look solid on the outside. These type of magnets, when you break them open, they're basically kind of turned back to powder. I have seen people who with the broken magnets on Free series that I've modified. I don't think I've broken mine yet, and I've used the heck out of mine. No, good there. That one, maybe I cracked a corner. In either case, if you do need to replace the magnet, here's the dimensions. 0.063, 1/16 inch by 0.2505, so basically 1/4 inch, by 0.509. Switch those up to metric. 13 millimeters by 6.4 millimeters by 1.6 millimeters. This is what happens when you design something in inches but get it made in metric. They'll round it off for you. Now the scales and the cam here are again exactly the same as the Free series. To me, this cam part is very interesting. They're obviously got to be using some metal injection molding to make this complex part. I don't think they're machining all this. That's a really cool component to me. Now they did apply a little bit of a brushed finish that I don't think is in my Free series. No, I guess it does have the brushed finish. The fact that they get this part so smooth, it's really quite amazing to me. So I've got my scales. We're not going to go ahead and take apart the pliers necessarily. I need measurements for my CAD model for the couple of new components, the blade and this guy. I already have my very detailed 3D models for some of the other components, so I'm not going to end up taking apart the scales. The scales are the same dimensions as on the Free P4. The same way, same metal bent and everything. So there's a little wear mark here from where the pliers close against that. And then this little nub, which is kind of uncomfortable when you're operating them, that basically just holds your tool in alignment when it's closed right here. Now we'll talk about this little plastic piece here. This little plastic piece covers the magnet here. That just lets you, it kind of just evens this out with the scales and makes it easier to clean off the magnet if any filings get stuck there. If you end up losing this little piece, which is fairly common, your tool is going to work just the same. Your magnet's not going to fall out. It's actually retained by these little cutouts in the spring arms. All right, so let's go ahead and take apart the other hinge. And I'm going to use my lovely hand tool rescue to hold this guy together. Just so he stops popping open on me. The spring-loaded action is causing it to open up. Now, I've taken apart quite a few free series tools in installing modifications, and so far I've only ever had to use heat to release the Loctite once. Come on. This might end up being a second time. He does not want to move. Ah, come on. I may end up having to steal a screw from my free P4 afterwards, because I think I'm tearing this one up pretty good every time this slips. Wow. All right, I don't want to end up melting out the plastic piece here, because I'm going to have to get this hotter, so I'm going to go ahead and try to pull him out. And it should just kind of slide out. All right, now there's nothing that should get melted if I have to heat this up some more. So since they're using at least they haven't been historically using what looks like a chemical thread locker, blue thread locker, which is medium strength, it should release with heat. All right, it's gonna get hot enough that I do not want to touch this. Let this be a lesson if you decide you want to take apart your garage number 5 or your free series. It may not go your way. I'm really tearing up the head on this side. This side has not slipped yet. Now, if you're doing this, by the way, do something like this with right angles. Don't try to do this with 2 screwdrivers pushing like this, because if you slip, you're going to push them right through your hands. Doing it this way, I'm more likely to kind of hit my palms together than to push all the way through. Ow, he's still hot. Oh great, the side that is getting stripped was the side with the shoulder washer. So they have used a different thread locker. Oh, that might be why. I think they're switched from medium strength thread locker, which was blue, assuming they're using Loctite brand. I think they're using high strength thread locker now, which is why this guy was so tough. So it may be harder to take these apart in the future if they've switched from the blue stuff to the red stuff. I thought that was white, but it's actually kind of a pink color. All right. Cool enough to work with now. So we'll get in here. In fact, we're going to use a little micro driver here. Go through there. All right, so taking that apart, I tore up the head on this guy pretty good. It's not going to work really well in the future. So we are going to swap that out. Now, I've, of course, taken apart my free series many times. And by the way, I haven't put any thread locker back in. And these really shouldn't be prone to becoming loose anyways, for a couple of reasons. The All these are pivoting on the shoulder here, so there really shouldn't be any torque that's spinning this back and forth constantly that would cause that to come loose. And we'll see if they're any different. Let's keep that in there so I keep my washers from moving. See, mine is got plenty of wear. Clean it off a little bit. I'll grease this when I put it back together. So these are the exact same length, so no, they did not change the length of these. It's probably appropriate that I'll probably have one of the first modded Garage 5s, or I'm actually swapping out a tool. Again, ruler, pretty useless, but you can see I've used the flathead on here. It's actually even a little bent. Use this kind of as a pry bar. And then I actually do use the wire stripper on here. I've used it for quite a bit of modifications, doing installs at my house or wiring on my dad's van, things like that. All right. Put this back through here for a minute. Actually, no, I'm gonna start pulling tools out. All right, let's talk about the elusive bit driver. So it's kind of funny that this took so long to get in the free series, considering this is very close to what is in a Leatherman Wave. I don't have a Wave with me. That's one I give to my dad. But I will go ahead and take this apart. It's really simple. All they got is a spring. So we can dig under here a little bit. There we go. Hold that side. Get under this side. That's it. That's all there is to it. A very simple spring steel piece. So what I've been doing to modify mine is basically bending this over. So you could take this fully out and then try to bend that over a little bit further. I found just hammering it while it was in place was good, but then I still had to kind of take it apart and squeeze that together. The actual bit holder itself looks like an injection molded plastic. So you can see all the dots here from the pins, the ejector pins that push the part out. And it looks like here's maybe where their fill port is. I found it interesting that this has a flat compared to the more rounded profile on all the other free parts. That actually, you can actually feel that when you deploy it. It's not really annoying, but you can actually feel that. And then I believe this extra cutout back here is because of the way that they gotta try to mold in this hex shape. So there's probably a tool that comes out. Interesting. I'm seeing at the very back of this. I assumed that opening went all the way through, but no, there's a little circle in there that goes through into, there we go, there's a nice view. Interesting that they did that. I wonder if you take a smaller bit, a bit that has a small end, I guess is what I mean, put that in there, if that reaches all the way through to that. No, it's pretty much stopped. Not sure why there's a hole down there, just maybe probably a release hole for the injection molding mechanism. So there would have to be something that comes down, cam action, or an action that comes down through here and an action that comes through here, and they got to come apart in order to release this part. The other interesting thing is that this little tiny cutout that the spring arms go into, it's a pretty intricate little component. I'm guessing, this is just me speculating, I'd be willing to bet that the free series wanted to have a bit driver all along, but this was maybe very hard to develop. Getting the tooling for this kind of thing with precision is quite hard. Getting that to fit well. Now, people have talked about this rocking back and forth. To me, it's not a big deal. Again, as soon as you apply pressure, it's pushed against the back, and that's not a big issue. My only issue was that the bit came out way too easy, and just bending that spring arm fixed that. So we go ahead and put that to the side. Let me go ahead and actually pull the hem back out. I found this little part, another interesting, intricate little part. Not necessarily this cam arm. It is interesting that they milled this away, made this thinner so that it has a spring in this direction. All right, here is the retaining arm. This retaining arm goes along with the bit driver, basically to hold the bit from falling out. That is an issue with mine, where, well, I'm not going to do it. I have had issues where I've been pushing on this and I've had the bit release. Mine does hold. It's fairly tight, but still, while I've been using that hammer action, I have lost a bit or two. I've always been able to find it, but it has fallen out. So I like that they added that there. And I guess since we're taking measurements, let's go ahead. 0.56 millimeters, 0.022 inches. It's probably 0.02, and I'm getting a little bit of a bend fighting against the calipers here. The bit driver, 0.2 inches, 5.08 millimeters. And the micro driver, since mine's got a bend, let's go against a thinner part, 0.069, 1.75 millimeters. All right, pulling out the scissors. Now the scissors are exactly the same as the Free series. They actually are a 3-piece design that's riveted. So there's a spring arm here, a riveted piece here. Actually, I guess technically 4 pieces if you count the rivet. I do quite like the scissors. I do think that they could have made them longer. I think the reason they're not longer is that I think because of the T2 and T4, I think they fit that profile and then just didn't make it longer, so they didn't have to tool a whole new piece just for the Free series. All right, my washer is falling out here. There's the thick washer there. I don't see any thin washers yet, but I've got another spring arm, another spring arm here. No thin washers yet. And then the file and the thick washer. And the washers will often get pulled right into the magnet. By the way, those thick washers are 0.029 inches or 0.75 millimeters. Let's double check it with another one. Yep. All right, the diamond file. This, besides the bit driver, this and the bit driver are the 2 major improvements to the Garage 5 and presumably the Arc when it comes out. I'm extremely happy with this. It's a much bigger file surface than I was getting out of the T-Shank file from the Surge. I've already used it quite a bit and it's been great. So one thing is I was going to apply a chisel edge to this. And so let's go ahead and try that now and see if we can make that work. So what I'm going to do is I don't have a bench grinder. I do have a sander. So I'm going to do a sander and then a whetstone, and we'll see if we can get this to a chisel edge. All right, now this is a pretty coarse belt to be using. However, it's really all I got right now to apply this. No, I do have something better. Let's not make a mistake and send this go flying in there. I got a better idea. All right, here's what we're going to try using. This is the blade sharpener for lawnmower blade sharpener on a Dremel. This will let me set the angle a little bit better. And one thing I'm going to do, make sure and do, is that I'm grinding away this side and not this side. The diamond side will eat this. Pretty much exactly what it's made to do. And so we're going to file away this edge. And so I'm going to hold it in here like this against this edge. That'll kind of give me a nice angle, and then we'll use maybe a whetstone to finish it up. Let me go ahead and move some of this away. So I want to make sure and keep the temper on this. So I need to have something to cool off. thing I might do is work this on my glass mat here, which should be very flat. And this is 1000 grit sandpaper. Might be able to go a little bit lower. Starts cutting through the sandpaper. It's probably getting sharp enough to go to the whetstone. Probably could have taken half the time doing this in some other method or a bench grinder, but this is getting there. All right, let's see if it can chisel some wood. This isn't particularly hard wood or anything, it's just what I got laying around. Be easier, of course, with the tool attached to this. I think it could be a little sharper, but it is working. Okay. So the next morning, I've put this together wrong 3 times, so I needed some sleep. And I have some reference up here on my iPad. I still already have the cam, magnet, and retainer, or kind of not magnet, retainer, kind of the magnet plastic piece already on this side. And when putting this back together, the scissors should end up next to the logo. By the way, mine is serial number 233. So, find this opening is getting very annoying. That spring-loaded action pops it open on me almost constantly. All right, a little bit of a reverse order compared to what I have here, but we're going to start with the shoulder screw, then thick washer. In the case of the Garage 5, there's only one thin washer. I'm going to put our file in. Make sure you got this flat side down towards the magnet. Then one of the spring arms. This little square cutout goes towards the magnet. And quite often you have to kind of tweak the spring arm a little bit, pushing it down in order to get it to go through the shoulder screw here. There we go. And then I'm going to do mine a little bit differently, debating between which side I want the micro bit driver on. I think I want the micro bit driver next to the file. And I'm going to keep that out because he's kind of handy for doing the assembly. Now I did end up straightening out my micro bit driver. If I didn't mention it earlier, it had a slight bend at the very end here, probably caused either by milling or just a defect in the part when it was cooling. And so I ended up having to basically hammer this against an anvil surface on my vise, and then also in the vise, compress it down. Holding it up against glass now, it's nice and flat. Let's see, actually, you know what? I want, this is actually the normal setup, I think. Yeah, it is. I wanted this spacer between the two, but maybe I'll go ahead and put it back normally now that I got that flattened out. So, bit driver next. Then the retainer. Getting that hole lined up is a little tricky here. There we go. more spring arm. When you're putting in these spring arms, it's really easy to accidentally push that little piece of plastic out with a magnet if you're end up in the middle and you just kind of shove it out of the way when you push that down in. So just be aware of that. Next up's the scissors. And then we're going to put this flat. Let me take this guy off. And getting this washer in is always the trickiest part. It gets pulled into the magnet all the time. So I try to start from this end. Get it close to the right spot. Tweak it with the microbit driver. And we'll center it. Come on. There we go. Make sure that that shoulder screw is compressed all the way in. Grab our number 256 screw. And I'm just going to hand tighten this right now. We'll finish tweaking the tightness. Just make sure that all the tools deploy properly. Another thing to double check for is just to go ahead and open it and make sure that the magnet didn't get sucked in, or one of the washers didn't get sucked into the magnet, which we're good. All right, starting with the other side. Okay, so we'll start with the shoulder washer. Actually, this time I need to put the cam in and the magnet. So first thing to put in is a little magnetic spacer. If you ever lose this plastic bit out of your tool, because it does fall, I've had it fall out. It's no big deal. The only reason it's really there is to help kind of let you clean magnetic filings off of the surface of the magnet. And it is so annoying to get in because it just is kind of springy and doesn't want to even be gripped by. Almost flipped that over on myself. There we go. Next up's the cam. Making sure to get it docked nicely. There we go. All right. Shoulder standoff screw washer. I don't know what to call that. Then the thick washer. And I'll put the thumb stud in later. Our MagnaCut blade. And this had a 0.005 washer. Guessing they put that in so that the paint doesn't become an issue. And he just got pulled into the magnet. Okay, that is on. Gotta be real careful here that I don't lose that washer into the magnet. So let's give myself some more shoulder to work with. At the same time, I'm trying to make sure I don't push that little plastic piece out. I think we're good. All right, now I gotta decide on how I want these tools to fan out. So by default, since I'm just replacing the can opener with the ruler, we'll go ahead and put the ruler next to the MagnaCut blade. And the package opener. Then the awl. One more spring. Then the saw. Come on, let go. All right, now we're ready for the washer. If I'm lucky, it's going to stay in place while I use the microbit driver to get that centered. There we go. And looks like one of the cam is off a little bit. There we go. All right, that is in. Let's go ahead and put the thumb stud back in so we can deploy this and get the feel of it. Tighten that guy down nice and good. Let's go ahead and put our microbit driver back in place. So I'm only going to turn this about a quarter turn at a time. There we go. Nothing's rattling. Fan out the blades. The other thing I need to do is oil this now that I've taken it all apart. If there was any oil in here, I pretty much removed it. I just like to use 301 oil. Let it penetrate in there. Get everything moving. All right. Our Leatherman garage number 5 is back together. So now that it is modified, I have a chisel edge on my diamond file, and I have back my wire stripper and my small flathead. And like I said, no one ever really uses the ruler. About the only thing it is good for is wire stripping, as far as if you needed to measure and try to get that consistent. And that deploys real nice now. I gotta say that thumb stud's very nice. All right, folks. Thanks for watching.